A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Welcome again. It's been a while actually since we've had a webinar. I've been quite busy with uh, looking after two young ones and having the spiritual month of Shahr Ramadan, enjoying that in Pakistan, and just having some time, some self-care time, which I think is important. But we wanted to uh, be a bit strategic on the webinars and look at things which are coming up. And one of the things that keeps coming up in our support groups is how do I build friendships? How do I build support structure around kind of apart from the virtual peer support groups that we're creating, and what that looks like. And so we have a very special guest, and I'll introduce her. And we're very happy to have her on. And I'll also discuss about the book and um, really fantastic themes about how to bring that support, how, especially in a faith-centric way, to see how we need those support circles for us in the Muslim community and what that looks like. And as usual, as we start these sessions, as you know, we start with the Quran. So the verse that I've chosen today is from Surah At-Tawbah. This is verse 71. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is talking both the believing men and believing women. So وَالْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَالْمُؤْمِنَاتِ بَعْضُهُمْ أَوْلِيَاءُ بَعْضٍ. This concept of wilaya, or this concept of awliya, that we are allies. We have this allyship of part of being in the Muslim, and the mu'minun supporting each other. يَأْمِرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. And of course, the injunction on to enjoin what is good, but also to forbid what is wrong, and speak out when there's injustice and there's wrongness. وَيَقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَيُطِيعُونَ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ. They establish prayer, they give zakah, and they obey Allah and His Messenger. أُولَٰئِكَ سَيَرْحَمُهُمُ اللَّهُ. That on them, Allah, for them, will have His special mercy. Inna Allah Azizun Hakim. Indeed, Allah is exalted in might and wise. And I wanted to reflect on the word awliya, and what does that actually mean in a practical sense to us. So when we look into our community, how is it that we have structures which allow us to have that allyship, that sense of someone's going through something that I'm going through as well, and really have that sense of support. And inshallah, we'll get to explore the different circles of what that allyship might look in terms of immediate support, and then outwardly support, which is then available. For those of you who don't know what we do, so we are a peer support organization for Muslims who struggle with gender or sexual identity. We really created this because I think, very similar to probably Sister Myira, when perhaps she started, where there wasn't much in the Muslim space for like a faith-centric approach, and I know, as Sister Myra talks about working in diversity, there's intersectionality, right? So there's intersectionality between faith, between sexuality, between gender. And we found that the current services that were in the UK were not really providing support for Muslims who came from a conservative worldview and wanted support and just a safe space to say, I have these feelings, or I have this gender. It doesn't really define me, and I want to see how I can live a life a God-centric life, whether that is in a relationship where they want to get married, or they just want a safe space to talk about their attractions, and they don't want, what I would call oppressive practice, which is the therapist goes and says, no, you must be this, or you must be that, or you must identify as this, and if you don't identify as this, then you're lying to yourself, which kind of defeats the whole point of therapy, with the client leading the way and the client leading what's right for them and so on. And unfortunately, we had a lot of experiences, people coming to us and going to therapists, and they're saying, no, you can't be this, you can't be Muslim, you can't be this is the way that you need to define yourselves. And similarly, we've had people who've not been conservative, and they've come to me and they said, Ali, if I go to a therapist who is, is not faith sensitive, even though I identify as gay and lesbian, they just don't get the context of what it's like identifying as either same-sex attracted or lesbian or gay. I don't see that I get they don't really understand the difficulty that we experience in our communities while we're doing this. So there's a lot of organizations which were working with what we would term as LGBTQ affirming organizations, but there was not organizations which were faith affirming, and it's not like we're competing with each other, but we're meeting different needs of different clients. And I think that's what diversity looks like. That's what anti-oppressive practice looks like, where you're saying, actually, there is a need for this community. We may have a different viewpoint from other organizations, but it doesn't mean we're bashing those other organizations because we have a different viewpoint to them. And I think that's the beauty of diversity. And through, some of my team members, they said to me, maybe we can advertise ourselves as a sexual minority within the LGBTQ. Maybe that's how they see us. So yeah, it's so we exist for Muslims who are looking for a God-centric way of finding their way out of sexuality and gender. These are the services we offer. I want to have a big shout out for our Arabic Circle. Our Arabic Circle was completely full. It's been full for months now. We recently got a second volunteer who has volunteered their time. So we have a new time of Mondays 8 p.m. in Cairo. So I know a lot of people were looking for an Arabic circle. Alhamdulillah, we have a second one. We also have a women's circle, which is open. And then we have two men's circles. They're quite full, but there is still space at the moment, at least for them. And then we have webinars like we have here. Our next will be on parenting. Again, this was intentional because a lot of parents came in and they said, we want something around parenting. So we would have Sister Anisa, which will join us from Michigan, who will join us in exactly a month's time for this webinar. So to introduce our chief guest of the webinar, and I'm so happy that as we were speaking earlier, she has a very busy schedule, so we're so grateful that she could be with us. I started, for me, when I started in counseling myself, and I looked up in Google Muslim counseling, the first thing that came up was MCAPN. So I can't verbalize how important it is to have that directory, and so many people come to me and they say, Ali, do you know any Muslim, where are we doing that? And I think having that voice, having that Muslim voice in an organization like the BACP is so important. And somebody who has ADHD, not shy about saying, yep, I'm Muslim, I have ADHD. And I think there's huge barriers which have been kind of um, talked about. And I know that Sister Myra does great work around the difference between cultural competency and cultural attunement, right? So it's like, what does it mean to be competent, but are you really attuned to um, this thing? Like what we're discussing here, right? Sexuality and gender is a very sensitive topic, and you need the right attunement to say, I can have groups which have different views and they offer different support structures, but just because people have different views doesn't mean that they're necessarily opposed to each other, right? And that oppressive practice is bad in any setting where the therapist is dictating their values onto the client. Um, Sister Myra is as well as a coach, she's a counselor, she's a clinical supervisor, she's based in Leicester. She takes clients both internationally and locally. Um, uh, I've used this term a lot, and she uses it in her book, Anti-Oppressive Practices and Faith-Sensitive Therapy, offering both short and long-term counseling to adults, couples, children, and young people through her private practice. And we'll show you the email address, sorry, the address for that as well. She draws upon psychodynamic, integrative, and Islamic counseling approaches and tailors support to her clients' needs. Alongside her work in a clinical practice, she also provides supervision for trainee counselors, EAP, and as I mentioned, the fantastic MCAPN, which is widely recognized among Muslim mental health. Um, and she's also a consultant and media contributor, and has won many awards. And it is it's as a fellow Muslim counselor, it's wonderful to see the recognition. I think when there's recognition given to Muslim counseling at that end, and it kind of um, makes it easier, I think, for the rest of us who are also working in faith-sensitive settings to say that actually I can be a Muslim, I can be in the UK, and I can still have that voice of a Muslim being in the UK. So the book, as I said, Working with Diversity, which is specifically for therapists, which is written, and I'd love to kind of understand and hear more from her by what she means by anti-oppressive, because I really like that term. I have a understanding in my head what I mean by anti-oppressive, but I'd love to hear from her. And of course, the latest book which I've got here, which is the Muslim Guide to Wellbeing, which I just opened up and I went straight to support circles, because that's what I do day in and day out with the peer support groups. And I was like, wow, yeah, this is really good. And I reached out to her, and she was like, yeah, let's do this webinar. And here we are. And so grateful. Um, so the email address, if you want to contact Sister Myra, is myrakhancounseling.co.uk. You can put that on Google website, it will come in. There's obviously a 20% off discount at the moment for Muslim Wellbeing. I really like chapter 1 as well, because chapter 1 draws on the Islamic concept of what this is, and it's really nice to kind of see that the integration of the Quran and with psychology, and of course, you know, absolutely a fantastic service with both for counselors and for clients. So there's a lot of time, sometimes people come to me and say, Ali, I need a Muslim supervisor. The therapist that's coming to me and saying, who's a Muslim supervisor? But also for clients as well, providing that support and really taking um, I think we're in our nascent phase in some respects, it seems, but I think we're growing as a Muslim voice in the UK. And I want to shout out to people like Sister Myra who are allowing that to happen. And been at it much more longer than I have, and I'm very new to the field. So without further ado, I hand over to Sister Myra.
Oh, thank you so much, Ali. Assalamu alaikum to everyone that's joining us. Already you've got me thinking about lots of things, and I'm thinking we only have like the next kind of hour and 15, of which I'm only going to take up 45 minutes to present and hold time at the end for Q&A, but already getting me to think about this broader importance of anti-oppressive practice. And when you mentioned there is absolutely a difference between and a distinction between cultural competency and cultural attunement, a beautiful example came to my mind, because the difference, an example of the difference would be cultural competency would be a therapist knowing that perhaps for a Muslim client, if they came with concerns about their sexuality or gender, cultural competency would be for a therapist to know that there is potentially a conflict or a tension. Yes, that's cultural competency. I know that there might be a problem here. Cultural attunement, on the other hand, would be, and this is kind of how I approach my work, cultural attunement would be, okay, I get that there generically might be a tension or a conflict, but I don't actually know if that's the case for this particular client. And I want to learn from this client what their relationship is with their gender or sexuality and their faith. And that, for me, when you said it, I went, oh, actually, that's a really good example between when therapists claim to be culturally competent, they might immediately go, oh, I know that there might be a tension or a conflict. So let's kind of start from that point with a client, versus me going, it might be a conflict, but I don't know, because I don't know the client and I don't know
I
their
love
lived
that.
experience.
I love that example. It's like the bias that people say, oh, if I go to strong support, then they'll kind of push their narrative on me because that's their narrative, rather than thinking, no, if they're culturally attuned, then they will say, what do you want? What is it? What is the goal that you want to be? We know there's a conflict between religion and sexuality. That's clear. But where do you want to end up? Yeah.
Yeah, and what is your understanding of that conflict? Do you even think there's a conflict or not? And how are you managing that? So we're not even going in with already a preset starting point. It's
Mhm.
kind of recognizing that there are some general starting points, but that we don't automatically place the client on that starting point.
100%.
And for me, that is a really beautiful example of the difference between a therapist that might say that they're culturally competent versus a therapist that says that they culturally attune to the client. So thank you for that, Ali. I really appreciate you kind of actually giving a really good examples to kind of these concepts that we're talking about. So yeah, what we're going to be thinking about today then is, and as you said, Ali, it is in the book, intentionally so, which is all about support circles. And I want to put some context to the presentation, to the work that I'm going to be thinking about, and to this topic of support circles, in that when I think about well-being, I absolutely take the position that well-being, as is the version that is sold to us, is through a very Western, capitalist, commercial, individualistic lens, in the sense that your well-being is all about what you do for yourself in your own time, on your own, and only for yourself. That the idea that our self-care and well-being is completely separate from the rest of our lives and completely separate from other people and our relationships with anybody else. And for me, this book, particularly the second book, Muslim Guide to Wellbeing, is absolutely to relocate well-being and self-care back into its rightful position, which is at the very heart and center of our relationships. And when I say that, it is at the heart of our relationships with ourselves, with one another, and with Allah. So it's taking that holistic spiritual approach to well-being, that our well-being is a reflection of the healthiness of those relationships. So our well-being, whether it's in a good place, in a challenging place, in a not doing so good place, or in an optimum kind of healthy space, is a reflection of, are those relationships healthy? Am I optimizing those relationships? Because that is what is feeding me my well-being, or that's what's supporting my well-being. So for me, it's taking self-care as we perhaps have been sold it quite wrongly in the Western, through a Western lens, and we're relocating well-being and self-care back into its rightful position. So based on that, for me, our well-being, looking after ourselves, our self-care, the practices around it, the need to look after and optimize our well-being is therefore then intentional. We must be intentional about it. Again, you spoke earlier in quoting, you spoke about that allyship. And what it reminded me of was the very concept of intentionality within our faith, that if we are blessed for the intentions, why are we not then intentional about everything we do? It's really interesting how perhaps we are intentional about the things that have become almost like no-brainers that we are intentional about prayer, before we do something, perhaps before we speak, that we have an intention to do good. We have an intention to do this action or this task, whatever it might be. And yet when it comes to well-being and self-care and having healthy relationships, again, I'm thinking, why do we not give it that same level of reverence? Why do we not support it with the same level of intentionality that we do to other things, other kind of more practical or obvious things in our lives? So for me, self-care and well-being is as equally intentional in my life as anything else. And that's what I like to help people to think about. How can you be intentional to support your well-being and your self-care? Hence the book. The book is a very practical way to develop intentional, healthy well-being, optimal well-being for yourself and in your relationships. So I kind of want to put that at the very start of today, because as we're going to go through, and I've got some slides to share, but when I talk through this and offer this up as things for us to think about this evening, it absolutely is from a place of, let us be intentional about building, well, first of all, thinking about support circles and then building support circles. Because let's say we are intentional about having a good job, we're intentional about earning money, we're intentional about achieving certain goals in life, aren't we? But when it comes to maybe friendships, when it comes to having support around us, again, I find it strange then that we're not as intentional about it. Somehow we believe that friendships and healthy relationships should, in inverted commas, just happen organically. And yet I think, why shouldn't we be more intentional, dare I say strategic, about curating having healthy people in our lives? The people that are around us are going to be so influential in who we are. Again, what you've quoted earlier, absolutely, we know that who we surround ourselves with will influence how we then show up, how we then navigate our own lives, and how we then show up in return. So why would we not want to nurture and curate having not only good supportive people around us, but then nurturing those relationships with those people to be healthy? So for me, it's like joining all those dots, because in my ADHD mind, it kind of makes sense that we are just as intentional about our well-being and our relationships and our support circles as we are about anything else that we might plan or put into like a 5-year or 10-year plan. Why don't we do that about actually, forget a 5 or 10-year plan. I want a now plan. I want an everyday experience plan. What do I want my everyday living to look like? What do I want my daily experiences to look like? So tonight really is an invitation for all of us to be more intentional about our well-being and about curating and nurturing healthy relationships, and to have healthy and positive supportive people around us. So that's my kind of starter for 10. I'm going to screen share, so give me 1 second for that to come up, and hopefully people can see that.
Yeah.
So yes, you can see that, yes. So tonight then, in today's webinar then, as I've really been kind of teasing, is that we're going to be looking then about intentionally building our support circles. They are imperative, they are essential for our well-being and self-care, for the very reason that, as I've just said earlier, our well-being and self-care is not only about what we do on our own for ourselves, but our relationship with others is equally influential and fundamental to our well-being. So we want to absolutely optimize and nurture those relationships with others. And interestingly, as you've mentioned already, Ali, that in thinking about well-being and self-care, it is equally coming from a position of anti-oppressive practice. So generally, more broadly, I know, Ali, you asked me earlier about kind of what do I mean by anti-oppressive? For me, it is twofold, and these two things happen simultaneously. It is, first of all, to recognise ways in which we experience oppression. And that includes ways in which we self-oppress, ways in which we marginalise and minimise our own identity and our own lived experience, as well as how we show up and oppress others in relationships. So to be anti-oppressive is to, first of all, recognise ways in which we're being oppressive to ourselves and others, and then, not quite afterwards, but kind of almost simultaneously, because these two things are a bit chicken and egg. We do one by doing the other. By acknowledging where we are being oppressive to ourselves and others, we can then look to offer those relationships or nurture those relationships to be more anti-oppressive, for those relationships to be loving, caring, compassionate, for those relationships to offer equity, for those relationships to be authentic and vulnerable and containing all of the parts of ourselves and all of the parts of other people that we might identify or label as good and bad. So this is not about being anti-oppressive in which we only hold on to the good. Being anti-oppressive is to acknowledge and embrace all parts of ourselves and all parts of other people. How can we hold people and ourselves in our full humanity? So for me, being anti-oppressive is acknowledging how we are already showing up and showing compassion for how we are currently showing up, because we are existing in a world where we are being marginalized and minoritized, and how we show up in the world often is from a place of safety, protection, and survival. So rather than berating ourselves for showing up perhaps a little bit smaller than we are, perhaps being quieter than we are, perhaps not shining a full light on ourselves, maybe not wanting to be in the spotlight, it's about offering ourselves grace to how we are needing to show up. And then at the same time, offering and supporting ourselves to be able to show up in the ways that we would like to show up and want to show up. So for me, these two things go hand in hand. So what I actually mean then by anti-oppressive self-care is to honour our full humanity. For me, anti-oppressive self-care is to look after all the parts of me that are most lovable and easier to like and look after. Equally, to look after the parts of me that I can easily define or look at as the less lovable parts, the times where I might not show up as nicely as I can, the parts of me that can be self-critical or self-sabotaging, the parts of me that aren't the nicest parts of me, or the parts that feel filled with shame, the parts of me that are filled with feelings of inadequacy, the parts of me that are critical. So for me, anti-oppressive self-care is, I want to use the word freedom, and I know that's going to sound really kind of wishy-washy, but for me, it is advocating for my full self and honouring then all of me, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, rather than being judgmental of who I am and thinking that only the nice parts or the good parts are only the parts of me that can be loved. So for me, it's about how can I honour my full humanity, and knowing that in my full humanity, I am not an island, that I don't exist in isolation, that in my full humanity, my humanity includes who I am in my identity, and also my experience of being in the world, being in relationship with other people, recognizing how I show up in different spaces, recognizing that I have experiences of being in relationships where I am, have been, and can be harmed. Equally, being in relationships where I am, can be, and will be loved and cared for. So there's something about not trying to break us into pieces and only looking after the good bits. But anti-oppressive self-care is, can I treat all parts of me equally? And in doing so, can I therefore then also treat all parts of my relationships with others equally as well? So for me, it's embracing, honouring, respecting and loving our full humanity, all of our identities, all parts of us, and our relationship with others. So our self-care and our well-being includes not only nurturing a relationship with self, but also nurturing our relationships with other people and nurturing our relationship with Allah. So what anti-oppressive self-care does, it moves us away from the idea that self-care is about what I do on my own, in my own time, and only for myself. But it instead invites us to see our whole selves as worthy, that every single part of ourselves and our lived experience needs to be looked after and should be looked after. That we move into this collective view of well-being, that our well-being is not individualistic, that it is relational. Our well-being is reflective of the quality of our relationships. And it resists this individualistic, capitalist, commodified view of well-being. And I often joke that no amount of Lush bubble baths are going to make us love ourselves. And I say that because I used to, I have worked for Lush. So for me, I can absolutely accept that there is an absolute time and place where we go, gosh, I could really do with a lovely bubble bath. It's exactly what I need right now. But that being sold in and of its own as the one way to look after ourselves has been this commodified view of this Western capitalist commodified view of well-being, that by doing something, only doing things on our own for ourselves, will miraculously, the doing of something will miraculously shift us into being in a different state with ourselves. So as
And
I say, go on, Ali,
and I
sorry.
love that point because I think that's the main distinction between the Islamic counseling and the Western counseling, right? So sometimes the Western counseling has so much focus on the self, and they don't understand cultures which are collectivist cultures, and
Yes,
they
yes.
come from, I think you said it so well, relational healing that actually, to me, if I don't exist in my community or if I don't exist in my family, that's harmful. Whereas maybe in other cultures, you can exist individually, and it doesn't harm them. But for faith communities, you can't um, you can't exclude the community and the relationships that that individual has from the individual. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% agree with that, Ali, because our boundary around our sense of self is not a boundary around the individual. Our boundary around our sense of self is actually around the relationships. So there is a distinction between self and there's a distinction between who I am as an individual versus who I am in my sense of self. And that's the distinction between we can have boundaries around us as an individual, but our boundaries around our sense of self is broader than just the individual. They are boundaries around the collective communities and relationships and families that we are in. And so for me, whenever I'm working with clients or supervisees or delivering training or workshops like this, I talk about, when we talk about sense of relationship with self, sense of relationship with others, it's taking on board that our boundary, our remit, and and what gets included within sense of self includes our relationship with others. So this is why I do jokingly say, no amount of Lush bubble baths is going to make us love ourselves. Yes, because no amount of Lush bubble baths is going to heal the harm we experience relationally. It's not going to heal the wounds and the ruptures and the trauma we experience through being harmed in relationships and lived experiences. So that's why we have to take this communal, community, broader relational sense of well-being and self-care. And in doing so, for me also, anti-oppressive self-care then rejects this understanding or idea of perfectionism and performance. You know, this idea that we're constantly having to strive for success, that we have to be perfect, that it's very performative. And unfortunately, you know, social media can quite easily perpetuate
Mm.
that. You know, we only share our highlights, we only share the good bits. All that does, it sets up unrealistic expectations of what we then deem as good enough. And all of that then is feeding into our sense of not good enough. The
Mm.
more we are sold the idea that living or experiencing only good, or being this level of success, or being this productive, only then are you going to feel good about yourself. But that's like 1% of the global community. That's only a very particular type of person that is living with that level of productivity, or striving to present as that level of perfectionism. And so the
Absolutely.
rest of us then are constantly being fed, being reinforced and being fed then a feeling of, well, I then can't be good enough. So
Yes,
our
yes.
well-being is absolutely being directly impacted by what we are being sold as to what is deemed as success and good, therefore good enough.
Just to add to that
Yeah,
point,
please.
you know, in faith communities, we are so judgmental, and we
Mm,
have black and white thinking, right? So it's like,
mm,
I'm I think for us, especially with sexual identity, it's, oh, I'm either straight or I'm gay, and there's nothing in between, right? There's this black and white thinking, or there's this thinking which kind of says, um, I definitely need to, if I'm in recovery, then I must have a perfect recovery, and
mm,
if I've relapsed, and then, oh, I've gone backwards because I've relapsed, rather than thinking we're looking for progress, we're not looking for perfection. And you know, that uh, inner critic, which is very loud, which keeps showing up, and or you know, kind of this. I think some therapeutic practices which are so disgusting, where they're kind of promising, you know, people who are kind of promising a result, and
mm,
that's how they seem very performative,
mm.
rather than saying, well, we'll help you to see where things might go, and we'll work on it. And while that doesn't sound very nice to the client, that, oh, you can't guarantee me that this is going to happen, but it's actually the honest response to a lot of
Realistic.
this.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting because I appreciate this is going to be this is going to sound really there's real irony in this, that when we push for this commodified capitalist individualistic view of well-being and self-care, and it's driven by perfectionism and performance, and you talk about then the all or nothing, we fall into the binary. And I get that that word in and of itself that's the irony in all of this.
Yes.
We're being forced into a binary in which, if we're not the 1%, we're then nothing. It's like, because
Mm.
all or nothing, you either are this or you're that.
Mm.
And I'm kind of going, but where then does all the grey area, where does all the messiness go?
Mm.
And if 99% of, I'm thinking like almost like a bell curve, that middle 99% then is all the messiness. That's the big hump under our carpets where everything gets shoved. You know, that's the metaphorical, you know, let's just ignore it all and shove it all under the carpet.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so we're sitting then in these very kind of polar opposite but extreme
Mm.
positions of all or nothing, that
Yes.
either I am doing amazingly well and everything is going 100% perfect, or I'm rubbish, I'm not good enough, and my inner critic is running my inner script and my inner narrative, and my inner critic is defining who I am. And like you said, and absolutely I agree that then when it comes to therapy or coaching or any kind of personal development or self-help journey that anybody is on, yeah, there's the idea that I've got to do all of it 100% perfect. And the moment I lapse, I go from 100 to 0. I'm just like, there's no space in there for good enough. And for
Um,
me,
mm.
interestingly, my entire journey during my training, actually, most predominantly in my most predominantly in my training, and since then I've held on to this, which is it's learning to be good enough. It's learning to let go of the perfectionism. It's learning to let go of trying to constantly reach for the 100%, because we can't get to 100%, and neither can we stay there if we ever did deem to be there. But how do we, and this for me is the core of anti-oppressive self-care, is that by loving all parts of us, we can actually get to a comfortable position of good enough. And
Mhm.
for me, that's the freedom. That's the me unshackling the need then to be performative, unshackling and letting go of the pressures to be perfect. Um, so for me to embrace anti-oppressive self-care and well-being actually is to embrace me in my realistic, real who I am, warts and all. And I'm like, well, I'd rather that, because at least it's real and it's honest, it's intentional. And actually, this is who I and what I'm going to be judged on, not a perfectionism that I'm trying to attain. I'm not going to get I'm not going to get, well, what's that thing about? No, I'm not going to get rewarded for the strive for perfectionism. The intention towards it is good enough. We're going to be blessed in the intention of it. But
Mhm.
nobody is perfect. We are taught that from a spiritual faith perspective.
Mhm.
Nobody is perfect. So why are we trying to reach for something when what we actually have in reality, our real good enough selves, is actually the person that Allah has made us? And
Mhm.
that's who we're going to be judged on. I get quite emotional thinking about this, because I have lived and breathed being a therapist for the past 16 years. And I think about the amount of people that are beating themselves up, literally and
Mhm.
metaphorically, to
Mhm.
striving to be somebody who they are not,
Yes. Mhm.
trying to be somebody who they think will be the person that will be accepted, that will be loved, that will be adored. And I'm thinking, actually, do we not love and adore the people that show up authentically, the people that show up with their quirks and all, the people that show up with all of their, for me, all of my geekiness and my nerdiness? Like, there are many parts of me that I used to hide, thinking that they're the parts that people are going to think, Myra, you're really weird. And I'm like, no, shout and scream about your geekiness and your weirdness and your nerdiness, because then the other fellow geeks and nerds will find you. You know,
Yes.
it's about, if we show up authentically, other people, it gives permission then in a way for other people to show up authentically. And that's where we're meeting each other. That's where we're connecting. That's how we build these deeper allyships and relationships and connections. This is how we build our support circles, on authentic, genuine connection.
And
Yeah.
it's that negative shame which is drowning our communities, isn't it? So we see that in our work where uh, the instant we tell them, okay, you have gender dysphoria or you're same-sex attraction, it's okay. You're so Muslim, you're so good, you know? I can say, hi, I've been in this work for so long, I still have same-sex attraction, and there's nothing wrong with it. And I think it's kind of accepting those parts of yourself which bring about a lot of shame. And like you said, ADHD, I'm a Muslim, I've got ADHD. Let's normalize ADHD. Let's normalize having same-sex attraction. Let's normalize this. Just because we have different perspectives of what, Islamically, people may have different perspectives or thinking. It doesn't mean that um, you can't say Alhamdulillah, Allah blessed me with ADHD. Alhamdulillah, Allah blessed me with same-sex attraction. That we have a different view of it, rather than saying, no, I need to be this perfect heterosexual, cisgender, whatever kind of, like this perfection, and you're being authentic in who you are, and you're not denying that reality. And I think a lot of the times, a lot of hurt has been done by Muslim communities where, like, no, you need to be performative and say, no, you need to play that role because that's what a real man looks like, or that's what a real woman looks like, you know? And I think that has
Mm,
caused a lot of hurt in our communities where we have forced a narrative, right? Either it's been the community, it's been
yeah.
the therapist, it's been these oppressive powers. And so I'm definitely seeing we're aligned in the definition of anti-oppressive, right? It's kind of, I love what you said about the attunement that says, okay, this person may be having a difficulty with their faith and their sexuality or gender, but it doesn't mean that I, as a therapist, need to tell them what they need to do, you know? And at some point, they need specialist support, which is going to take them to where they want to be going, right? Rather than saying there's only one correct way to go, saying what is right for that individual and where is the support structure for those. And that's why I love your work on faith sensitive therapy, because it's saying, well, there's intersectionality, right? We can't look at the population in just one view. That's oppressive.
Yeah.
People need their own support structures and
Yes.
you know. Mhm.
Absolutely. And we can't look at those different parts of somebody separately. We can't say, well, faith is over here and your gender is over there and your sexuality is here
100%.
and never the twain shall meet. It's the idea that, well, let's get them all right, but separately. And I'm like, that's not how it
Doesn't make
works.
sense.
It
Mhm.
doesn't make sense. All parts of us are constantly in interaction with each other. All those parts of us is what makes us the whole of our identity. So we can't separate them out. They all have a relationship with one another.
100%.
And the other piece in which you've just said there, Ali, it reminds me of when you talk about the shame, the judgment that people might get from a community for having same-sex attraction, um, or are questioning, or even actually already perhaps identify as LGBTQ plus. In that judgment, couple of things here. One is that I'm sat here thinking, gosh, I'm in no place to judge. Like, who am I? I'm just one person. Who am I to judge? Like, genuinely, I'm like, who am I to judge anybody else
Mhm.
and their lived experience and their identity? I am just one person amongst billions and over the entirety of the Earth's history and of humanity's history. I'm going to be one of a billion people. Who am I to judge anybody else on their identity and lived experience? That's the first thing. So I have to, I have the intention to always sit in that humility that who am I to judge anybody else? Second of all, and it's a challenge, this is a challenge to the people then that do judge, which is if you are judging somebody else for having a lived experience or an identity that that individual finds challenging and that they have been given it as a test for them, rather than you judging them, where is your own humility that, gosh, somebody else has been given a test, a challenge in this life, in this dunya, that perhaps you yourself would not have been able to cope with?
Mhm.
And for me, this really challenges that judgment that for you to reject somebody else's or for you to want to shame somebody else's lived experience, you are shaming something that's been written for them. You are
Mhm.
shaming something that they have been tested with, and Allah knows what each of us are tested with, and we are all tested to the capacity that Allah knows we have. So if we are judging people on something that they are experiencing, and we judge it as wrong, then for a moment, just pause for a moment. And if you recognize or if you judge that as wrong or difficult or challenging, then can you for a split second moment acknowledge that this person is being tested? That has been written for that person. And second of all, if you think it is that wrong and that bad, can you at the very least then be grateful that you've not been tested with it? Again, where is the humility to go? Gosh, you are going through something that I am really struggling. I'm struggling that you're going through it. I struggle with that experience. Again, where is the humility to think, actually, do you know what? I've been spared that. So again, for me, I think this is real invitation for all of us to be invited into humility, that Allah is the all-powerful and the almighty. He has written for us what our lived experiences are going to be. He is the best of planners. He knows what is better for us than we know for ourselves. So can we sit in that humility and that empathy and that compassion, not only for ourselves, but also for other people, and also for other people, that what we have been given is what we have been given. They're the cards we have been dealt. And who are we to judge somebody else's cards? Because guess what? You could have been given that card, but instead you're busy judging what somebody else's card is. And I find that quite ludicrous, actually. This is why I kind of think this idea of being competent is judgment over what other cards people are holding or what other cards people have been dealt. So for me, this is the work of anti-oppressive self-care and well-being. How can we embrace and nourish all parts of us? And in doing so, how can we offer that up to other people as well in our relationships? Because that's how we build positive, healthy relationships. So for me, anti-oppressive practice then is to nurture your positive, loving traits and to deal with and manage and look after your challenging, negative and unhealthy traits as well. I'm mindful of the time, and I appreciate, Ali, that I can talk with you for this
No,
for
I
hours.
think you hit on such good points there where and I think we're both in the same I love what you're saying in terms of sometimes we lack humility, like and I actually think sometimes oppression and therapy can be eye-opening. I had experiences when I went to a therapist here in the UK. And I said that, for me, I'm not gay. I don't identify as this. And um, it was a CBT therapist, and they were
Mm,
very much like, "Oh, we need to correct the thinking." And
mm,
she said to me, "You created a mantra in your head," and that's how she described my struggle. And it was a really difficult experience for me. It was the first time I was taking therapy, and
mm,
I went to the first session and I cried because I was like, she's not understood me. But I was just a student. I didn't have money, and I had medical insurance. I went the second time. Second time, she actually halfway through the session, she stopped and she said, "I can't do this." So I
mm,
was like, wow, okay. So the person that I've gone to help has denied therapy halfway through the session. And then I left that. And what that experience taught me was if somebody comes to me and they're LGBTQ identified, I would never shame them, right?
mm,
Because they're coming from an experience which I don't have. I don't have that viewpoint. But if somebody comes to me, like what you said, with a different viewpoint, I would never shame them because they've come to me for help. I might not agree with, personally may not agree with it, but that's the whole point of the therapeutic relationship. It's not that I'm not putting my ideology on the client. I'm meeting that person. If they've come to me, and in my work, I've had clients who identify LGBTQ, they're coming to me. Why they're coming to me? Oh, you understand the cultural competence. You can be maybe culturally attuned. And I think it's that humility which I find is sometimes unfortunately missing in our
yeah.
practices, where it's like, so hang on, what are you doing? Oh, you're allowing people to not be you're forcing people to be straight, you're forcing people to do this, and there's an immediate judgment which is placed on us, before we can say, no, there's intersectionality, there's different ways of thinking about it. And I think that uh, sometimes there's levels of diversity which are unfortunately more popular than other versions of diversity, right? And I think that when you recognize that, then you realize the true oppression on minorities as what's really happening.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of name that a bit further, add to that in the sense that in therapy and equally within in coaching, if you go for coaching, it is about, for me, it is about how do we hold space for any client, no matter what issues they're coming with, no matter what it is that they're trying to resolve or heal.
Mhm.
It's about how do we hold a space for that client to make meaning themselves of their lived experiences and of their identity. As you said, irrespective of what my personal views are on it,
Mhm.
it is
Mhm.
about my job is to hold space for that person to make sense of it. And again, it's not about judging or labeling then an experience as right or wrong, halal or
Mhm.
haram. It's about
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
your lived experience. That is your identity. So let this space is a space then for us to unpick it, play with it, have explore it a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, take it,
Mhm.
undo it into 1,000 pieces, and let's try and make sense of it. But for me, it's about no matter what the lived experience is, no matter what the identity is, that for me is the process that I am facilitating, as opposed to going, well, I'm only going to facilitate only if you are X, Y, and Z
Yes.
identity, or only have A, B, and C lived experiences. But if you're
Yeah.
any of these, I'm not going to. Again, it's about our humility to, again, this is why I talk about anti-oppressive practice and working within diversity. It is the ability to recognize that we are always working within diversity because we are always working with diverse experiences. No two people have the exact same lived experience in the world. Can you just, that for me in itself is mind-blowing. No
Yeah.
single, no two, nobody in the world has the same experience of being in this world. So I can never be competent in knowing somebody else. All I can do is be curious about it. All I can do is learn about it and attune to it in the process of facilitating that meaning making process for them. So for me, this is why if we can offer that to clients, we the parallel then is that we offer that to ourselves and to each other in all of our relationships. How do we embrace all of us, each of us individually in our lived experiences and identities and parts of us? How do we embrace and hold and support the lived experiences, identities, and parts of the people that we're in relationship with? So for me, it's taking what I have done for years in therapy and thought, hold on a minute, this is equally applicable to all of our lived experiences and relationships every single day. Yeah. I'm mindful of time and what I do want to move into because to kind of do what I said on the tin essentially, which is about the support circles piece.
Mhm.
So I feel like we've teased this long enough. So just to kind of again make this contextual here, that for me, it's about recognizing that well-being and self-care is intentional, it's proactive, that we are looking after all parts of us. And it's about going back to an optimum alignment with who we are in our relationship with self, in our relationship with others, and our relationship with Allah. So really for me, self-care then is to prompt ourselves to think about or question or ask ourselves, what do I need emotionally, physically, spiritually, culturally, socially? Ordinarily, when we think about self-care, it's a bit like, what do I need right now for myself? And actually, what this is doing is this is inviting us to think about what do I need in all those different areas of those parts of me. I will have self-care emotional needs, self-care physical needs, spiritual needs, cultural needs, social needs, relational needs. So it's about embodying, embracing, and speaking and meeting all of those parts of us. And as I've said, really, that what I offer up in the book then is to recognize then that my model for well-being then is centered on these three key areas of relationship. It is about again intentionally, proactively investing in all three of these relationships so that is what gives us the balance and the optimization. There is no point kind of leaning in only into one when actually we then are neglecting or negating the other two, or only leaning into two and negating one of them. It's about, think of these as kind of three little deposit pots. Am I investing into these am I investing and depositing into all of these three relationship pots? Am I doing what I can to the best of my ability to invest into these three relationships? And as I said then, when we think then about Islamic well-being, we think about and Islamic well-being absolutely is synonymous then with anti-oppressive well-being and self-care interchangeably. It then is about looking at all the different parts of our well-being that need looking after. Because again, often when we think about well-being, I think it's very quick for people to think about physical well-being. Yes, that's my bubble bath. That's me going for a walk or a run, going to the gym, eating well. Emotional well-being. Yes, I do a bit of journaling or I go to therapy. I'm thinking there are other parts of our well-being that then are being neglected. So how are we looking after our spiritual well-being? How are we looking after our mental well-being, our social well-being? And also, I think this is the one that absolutely always gets missed, our professional and financial well-being, because all of these collectively support our holistic well-being generally. So key components here to our well-being as a whole. And so one area then, or one key area that supports our well-being will be our relational well-being. And so for me, in writing the book and in delivering relationship therapy, relationship coaching to a lot of clients, I recognize that for a lot of people, we are not intentional about nurturing the people around us. And also, I think, again, what has been sold to us through that individual Western commodified version of well-being, that capitalist version of well-being, are social circles. Now, social circles is purely about who do I have around me socially. That might be meeting our social well-being. But we need more than just friendships. We need people in our lives that are going to support particular needs that we have, that we gain through the experience of being in relationship with different people. So in the book, as you mentioned, Ali, there's a whole section on this, and this is what I'm going to talk us through quite quickly, because I'm mindful of time and I want to open this up for discussion and Q&A. So when I talk about support circles, this is about being intentional about who are the people around me that offer me support in very specific ways, which I'm going to mention in a moment, but people that are there to support me and I am there in return to support them. One way that we support each other is through that social connection, but that is just one way of support. There are many others. So what I invite people to do who are watching us and joining us is to think about, and these are then activities that you can do this evening or after, at some point after today's webinar session, is to draw out your support circles. Who do you have in those circles already? Who is in your inner circle? Who are your closest relationships? That middle circle. Then in that, in that center circle, in that middle circle, then in that second circle, then fill in who are your good friends, your trusted colleagues, extended family that might not be part of your inner circle, but who do you have then in that medium level circle around you? And then thirdly, who then is in your wider circle? Who are your casual friends, your acquaintances, your wider community? The people that you might say hello to. Maybe it's somebody that you've become familiar with because you're at the gym at the same time, or the classic, bus stop friends. If anyone's familiar, back in the day, you had the people that you always commuted on the same bus or the same tube every time. Who are the people then that are casual friends around you? So the first thing that I invite us to do is figure out, well, who do we already have in our support circles? And this is where we start to become intentional about enriching these circles. How do we then start to increase this, populate this, nurture this to become more optimum? So based on filling in these three circles, I then invite us to recognize that there are different roles that people take up in relationship to us. And for me, this was an absolute game changer, because for me, I kind of felt, again, being ADHD, being neurodivergent, I really struggled relationally, and I would put everyone in one category of friendship. And it took me a long time to figure out that the reason why I have the friends I have is because they actually offer me something slightly different from one another. And so for me, this is a framework for people that perhaps are unfamiliar with different roles that people can have in our lives, and as well as for all of us to be more strategic and intentional. So what I invite us to do is, based on filling in your support circles, now recognizing that there are particular support circle roles that people can have in your life, I then invite you to fill in a grid to allocate the role next to the people that you think that they fill that role for you. So for example, who is your fun friend? So based on the people that you have in your support circles, who do you think then is your fun friend? Who actually fills the role of being cheerleader, etc., etc. So what I'm inviting us to do then is, I'm going to go back a slide because it's easier. Out of these 9 roles, it's essentially going, well, these are the 9 roles. These are the 9 names of roles and their descriptions. Have a look through these 9 roles and their descriptions and think, oh, who does that remind you of? Who does that in your life? Because what we get to essentially is, if we were to put names next to each of these 9, where we might get to then is recognizing that actually I have a lot of friends that are in my fun friend category or cheerleader role, but actually, do I have a motivator? Maybe not. Do I have an advisor? Do I have somebody that I go to for that advice and guidance? So what this helps us to see is, again, are we optimizing these roles? Are we optimizing the people that we all need around us? And again, the reason why I say be intentional, be strategic, is to remove the shame that we've been talking about, is to remove the shame that as human beings, we're not human doings, we're human beings, that we need all these people in our lives. As relational beings, as people that can't survive without other people, there is a reason why we thrive in communities, in families, and in groups that support us, because we are surrounded by these 9 types of people. So in looking at these 9 types of roles, start to identify then, who are those people? What are their characteristics that mean that they fill those roles? And in what ways do they support you? And try and be as specific as you can, because again, this is about really identifying then where the gaps are. Equally, where you might then have a concentration of people all in one role. So you might have, as I said, lots of fun friends, but you don't have a mentor advisor person. And in filling out this table then, it's the invitation then. Are there any roles that are missing? Like, are there any roles where you have no name or only one name next to it? And in doing so then, how can you nurture those relationships? Are there perhaps people in your wider outer circle that's a casual friend or an acquaintance that you go, actually, from the little I know about them, they're showing characteristics or capabilities of being that role. And therefore, then how can you build and nurture that particular friendship with them? So how can you then intentionally build your support circle? So for me, and again, I appreciate that for me, this is really helpful because being ADHD, I like a good guidance. I like a good framework. I like a good model, something, it leans into kind of absolutely autistic tendencies as well. That, once I have an understanding of how something operates, a structure of something, I can now go and do it. So if this feels supportive for you, if this feels like, yeah, it does feel a little bit, what's the word? It feels a little bit strategic, but what it's going to give you then is nurtured optimum relationships and support circles. You would do this in the same way that you would perhaps figure out a 5-year plan for your career, how you might figure out a mortgage plan to get a house, get on the property ladder. It might be your plan to find a spouse. Whatever it is, we are so much more strategic about fulfilling and meeting roles and meeting goals in the rest of our lives. Why not do it when we think about who are the people that are going to be around us? The final question then that I invite us to think about when we think about nurturing our support circles, if I do go back a couple of slides, let me go back to these descriptions because they're helpful. Just as you're thinking about who in your life fits these roles, I also invite you to think about which role do you fit into? Which role are you for other people? And it might be that you are a different role for different people. And as we start to recognize then which roles are my strengths, it's then also strategic and an invitation and an intention. Can I show up more like that in those friendships? So it is reciprocal, because let's say, for example, the person that is your fun friend does not automatically mean that you are their fun friend in return. So this again is about recognizing, where do I show up my best for the people that are in my life? And how do I support those people to show up in their strengths and in their best ability for me? Because what we're not trying to do is move people into roles that, oh, well, a gap's missing, I need you to be this for me. Instead, again, this is the anti-oppressive part. How can I support somebody to really flourish in the role that is who they really are for me? And how can I then really support myself to flourish in the role that I am for them in return? So this is absolutely a relational dynamic. It's not just about who are those people in my circle, but who am I in other people's circles as well. So a really good activity, reflection to think about how we can be more intentional to build and nurture and curate our support circle roles. And the final thing I want to share with all of you, I never end any of my wellbeing workshops or self-care workshops without including positive affirmations. For me, again, it's about intentions. How can we, let's boost our blessings as a community here. Let's offer each other and ourselves intentions. So for me, positive affirmations are wonderful ways to practice gratitude. They're a wonderful way to evoke and support the blessings we have in our life. So what I have here are a number of affirmations. I've taken these are taken from the book, but they are not all the ones. I think in the book, Ali, you've got a copy of the book. I think there's 2 whole pages of affirmations. I've given loads in there. And of course, you can create and write your own. But I'm going to hold that slide up for a minute. If people want to have a look through, listen to your gut, listen to your intuition. Is there one in particular that is speaking to you? And please, make a note of it. And how we practice this is, can you say this maybe at the end of a salah, at the end of a prayer, when you've done your dua, at the end of it? Can you offer yourself a positive affirmation, an intention to be this and to practice this today or this evening? So for me, positive affirmations are part and parcel of my duas and part and parcel of my intentions for how I want to be and show up for myself in my relationship with Allah each and every day. So I'm holding that slide up for people to have a look through, see if there is a particular affirmation there that really speaks to you. Maybe you might want to combine a couple if a couple are speaking to you. But capture that, jot that down, make a note of it. See how you can integrate it into your gratitude practice and into your intentions, and to really nurture and optimize your self-relationship and your relationship with Allah. I'm going to leave that up there, and then we're going to stop sharing, and I think we're going to come back to a Q&A. But hopefully people have been able to get from that list something that they want to start practicing, or one that really speaks to them. And again, I appreciate for some people that, again, intentions are really important. Perhaps to take away from today then, one thing perhaps you've learned about yourself, and or one practice that you would like to carry forward. Perhaps set that as an intention. What would you like to do from today's workshop? Again, remember, there are the blessings in the intentions. And a quick plug for the book if people aren't aware of the title and they want the details of it. And as you said, Ali, there is a discount code on my website, myracancounselling.co.uk. If you click on the link there, you will get taken straight through to the publisher's website, apply the discount, and you'll get 20% off.
Fantastic, absolutely great.
Stop sharing.
And I have the book with me, and I got it on pre-order because I was really interested because of Sister Myira work in the community, and I went straight to the support circle, and actually she gave a whole new perspective to it that's not in the chapter. So thank you for that. And I now understood the roles, because a lot of us in our inner child sometimes want one person to play all of the
Yes, be
roles, right?
everything for me. Yes.
Yeah, and I identified to say, well, oh, he didn't give or she didn't give me the support that I needed, but to understand, and I love how you said anti-oppressive, that maybe that person can only give me that, or maybe that's what they're good at, and I need to broaden my circle. And what we were talking about shame earlier, where it's very difficult for us to build those circles because we're thinking that person's never going to support me, they can never be a support. And then I like how you've broken down the different ways that that support can be, rather than that inner child wanting of, this is my best friend. My best friend is just going to hold me completely.
Yeah.
And yeah, and
In,
yeah,
yeah, and that's so unrealistic, but also that is oppressive. The idea that we put all of our well-being needs, relational well-being needs, all on one person. How oppressive is that we hand all of that responsibility to one person and go, you are now responsible for all of my relational support needs. And so actually to identify support roles, to share them out and delegate them amongst people, actually is an additional form of being anti-oppressive, which is to recognize one person can't be everything to me. And I'm therefore then, by delegating it out and sharing it amongst lots of people, I'm then not burdening one person with more than perhaps what they can handle and hold. And as you've just said, Ali, and also then allocating somebody a role, again, anti-oppressively, is to allocate them a role in which they already are good at. It's their strength. So again, you're not burdening somebody by getting them or wanting them to be something that is outside of their capability. I think that's something that we also have to be really honest about, is that people can only show up for us in the way that they are able to show up for us. And what we can't do is criticize, judge, reject, or shame them for, or criticize them for not being able to show up in the way that we need to. We have to start acknowledging and recognizing that how people show up for us, equally how we show up for other people, is whatever is within our capacity and capability. So this is why, for me, this support circle roles is actually a really helpful framework to help me understand that actually people are showing up in the ways that they're showing up, and it's in their strength and it aligns with a particular role. So I'm then not going to be upset with them or critical of them if they, let's say they're showing up as the advisor. I'm then not going to be critical of them if they're not showing up as the fun friend. It's like, but that's not their primary skill set or strength. So we're actually then nurturing friendships and relationships from a place of strength rather than from a place of what you can't be for me or what you can't do for me.
100%. And thank you so much for that. And I definitely now want to open up for Q&A, inshallah. So you can put your questions in. Um, there should be a Q&A option. And I can now see that people have already started putting in. So just know that this webinar is live and it is recorded. So you can raise your hand if you want to go, but that would kind of show your name and stuff. So if there's an option, if you want to keep things anonymous, and I usually don't read out names when I do the question and answer, just to kind of protect the anonymity of things. But if you really want to and you want to ask, raise your hand up and you don't mind, you record it and live, and you can do that as well. We already have a comment which says, "Thank you, wonderfully insightful lecture, very refreshing." Um, and then there's a comment actually on that, which is talking about faith and sexuality, what we were talking before. So this person is saying, for me, they're separate. So they're saying, if it's against Allah's command, how can you be anti-oppressive? So if someone identifies as LGBT, that is something that's difficult to share with others. Of course, seeing this from a parent's lens, right? So
Mm.
this is difficult to share with others, and relationship when with Allah, and it's difficult if you are disobeying them. So I think this alludes to what we were saying before, right? About seeing them as, rather than seeing faith and sexuality as distinct, rather than seeing them as merged. Mhm.
Yeah. What I want to say to that is that I think we fall into the trap of going, because something is against something, if one part is against another part, that somehow they're separate. But actually, that actually is that's actually a false narrative to have, because when something such as LGBTQ homosexuality, if we say that any sexuality that is not heterosexual, any other sexuality is against the faith, then the faith is already in relationship with it. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yes.
So actually, faith and sexuality are not separate, because faith has a ruling around sexuality. So then our need to want to separate them, I think, takes us into this very dangerous position in which we get into the shaming and the judgment of somebody even having the thoughts and the feelings and going, that's all wrong. You need to separate it out from
Mhm.
faith, as opposed to the work is about how do we support somebody who is sitting with that relationship.
Mhm. Mhm.
It is, as a therapist, it is to sit with, okay, what does it mean for you to be Muslim and have same-sex attraction? What does that mean? There is already a pre-written relationship. And so it is about, how do we sit with that person's experience, their particular experience of their relationship between their faith and their sexuality. The moment we try and separate it and go, well, faith and sexuality are two separate things, we are actually ignoring the teachings of the faith. We can't separate them, because there are rulings and there are clear boundaries around the relationship between faith and sexuality. There is already a relationship between them. We all, as individual humans, have a relationship between our faith and our sexuality, no matter what our sexuality is, including for those of us that are heterosexual. We all have a relationship between our faith and sexuality. It's just that for some people, their relationship is one of conflict and tension. And so for me, it's about offering space for somebody to be able to sit with their experience of that conflict and that tension. And that, I think, is what gets missed. Those spaces are, are, are what is needed, but what don't often get offered. And so it's a real, I think yes, I appreciate that this is going to feel challenging, but it is for us to take that step back and go, gosh, this person is being given this very particular challenge to navigate in this world. How do we support them to navigate it? How do we support them to make sense of it, to make meaning of it, for them to be able to recognize what is the impact on the rest of them? But if we separate it, what we are doing then is we are then positioning sexuality, all of sexuality, any type of sexuality, including heterosexuality, as something that has got nothing to do with faith. And yet, if we look at the teachings, the beliefs, the scriptures in our faith, a lot is written about sexuality, and particularly about harmonious, healthy relationships between husband and wife. So the idea that sexuality is separate from faith, I think that's a defense position. I think it's a very fearful position or reaction that we can easily take up, because we want to try and think that sexuality has no place in the faith. But we know lived experience means that we all have a sexuality. Lived human experience means that for some people, they are tested with a sexuality that does not directly complement and fit into the faith beliefs around being heterosexual. So I think it's for us to start to sit in a more humble, empathic position and approach to say, for anybody that is struggling with their sexuality because it is not heterosexual, that must be such a difficult, potentially difficult, challenging, confusing, fearful, worrying position to be in.
Absolutely. And I looked at even if you see BACP guidance on sexuality, they say sexuality is not one thing. It's broken into the attraction, the relationships, how that person identifies. So you have three things already in sexuality. You have the attraction, you have the behavior, and you have the identity. And somehow when we look at it from a very black and white lens, we make all three, the attraction, the behavior, and the understanding or the identity, as one, but they're not. They're separate for separate people. And I think it's what you said about loving all my parts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just loving these parts, but saying, I'm human, so I must have a sexuality, right? Because I'm human. So I'm going to have these things. Yes, I may have choice around the relationships that I make, but I definitely don't have a choice around my attractions. I don't really have a choice around that, right? And it's having, uh, those, like even when we say gay and Muslim, how can that be together? But then it could be in the sense of how you look at it, right? How is that person breaking it down for them? And that's why it's that unique lived experience which we've been talking about, the uniqueness of the individual that needs to be looked at rather than kind of having this from both sides, right? So from both sides of the spectrum, you can have a very black and white view of things, and I think that is what causes harm. We have another remark here, which is saying, "Thank you, really insightful. Love the task of categorizing relationships. Everyone should know this. So many relationships struggle because of exactly this expectation of getting everything from one person, and then their world shatters for them." This is what we were talking about, the support roles.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I think particularly, and I'm thinking particularly when it comes then to marriage. And that's again, I mean, part of my work as a therapist is I work as a couples counselor. And for so many people, unfortunately, they enter a marriage without really understanding what a marriage and a healthy relationship is. And they go in with a naivety that their partner then is going to be everything for them and is going to think that right now I found the one, now I found my husband or my wife, that they now are going to now meet all of those roles and they are now going to be everything that I'm looking for to live then this kind of fantasized life and lifestyle that I'm now going to have once I'm married. And I think again that's what causes a lot of problems in relationships, is because we don't look, it's far easier to look at where somebody falls down in a relationship than it is to continually think about where they're actually meeting our needs. And so when couples are coming for therapy, what often couples are coming in with is where the other person is letting them down, is where that person is not meeting their needs. And it's because they have the expectation that this person should meet all these needs. Again, this idea that because you have the label of wife or husband, that somehow, oh, again, it's actually quite ludicrous, but also very naive to think that all it takes is to go through in a car, then all of a sudden you're given a label, and miraculously that label then on you, that new identity as wife and husband, now means you have the ability to do all these things, the capacity to show up and meet all of these needs. And I'm like, well, if those weren't your strengths before, getting married, you know, having a niqab, can you imagine having a niqab and all of a sudden you're blessed with all of these characteristics that you never had before? So again, I think there's something about the importance of, you know, there's a whole piece here around premarital therapy, premarital kind of conversations to be had. And again, in the book, I talk about healthy relationships. I talk about red flags and green flags. I talk about how to nurture emotional availability and emotional capacity, and how to nurture that in your relationship with your partner and in your friendships as well. But for me, there's something here then around, let's stop feeding a fantasy, whether it's the Hollywood, Bollywood, Nollywood fantasy of romance and marriage, that this person becomes your kind of all-in-one, when the reality is this person is going to be the same person who they were when you got to know them, when you were speaking to them before marriage. They're going to be the same person. They're not all of a sudden going to change into being the perfect spouse overnight. Whatever they were capable of being and doing before being married to you, they're going to have the same capacity and capability after getting married. So for me, I really do advocate for premarital therapy. I advocate for really doing the work yourselves on your relationships with others, on your relationship with yourself, so that you can really look out for, will this relationship be healthy for me? Again, the other thing, I'm mindful of time, so I quickly want to mention this, that often when we're thinking about relationships and friendships, we often focus on the other person. We often get caught up in, well, who is the other person? What are their traits? What are they like? What can they offer me? And I think what we actually need to do is turn the spotlight back on ourselves and think about, well, when I'm in this person's company, when I'm in relationship with this person, what is the impact on me? How am I showing up? Does it support me to show up in the best way I can be? Do I feel safe enough? Do I feel peaceful? Do I feel regulated? If we're showing up and we're talking to somebody and we don't feel safe, we feel on edge, we feel dysregulated, we feel triggered, we feel agitated, we get anxious around, have they text me or not? Are you checking your phone every 2 minutes? These are all red flag signs that this person is not able to offer you, the two of you together are not able to find a place of regulation and peace. So whenever we are particularly looking for a partner in life, when you're looking for a husband or a wife, that it is not just about looking at them and what they can give you. It's absolutely about what is the impact on you and how you then are showing up in return, because those are your answers. Your answers are not about the other person, not about what job they do, how much they earn, what's our lifestyle going to be together. It is about, when I'm around this person, what is the emotional, psychological, spiritual effect, physiological effect on me? Because that is going to tell you whether this person offers you regulation, safety, and peace.
Absolutely, and there can be said so much about our community using marriage as a solution, right? It's like, oh, you're that age, get married, and there is very little support for Muslims who, let alone Muslims having sexuality issues, just Muslims even without sexuality or gender issues, just going 180 from, oh, I can't speak to the opposite gender, to now suddenly I have to get married and suddenly have to play these roles.
Yeah. And that's absolutely why in this book around well-being, for those of you that haven't got the book, just to kind of quickly explain that in the book, then there are 3 sections. Section on relationship with other, section on relationship with self, and then a final section, very large section, on relationship with others, because I think we underserve our communities in how to have good, healthy relationships. So everything in this book is filled with all of the stuff that I deliver and teach and offer in my therapy and in my coaching, particularly in my couples counseling and particularly in my relationship coaching. I work with a lot of singles. But this book then really does contain all of this information about how to support and have these healthy, nurturing, optimum relationships. Not only so that we can have healthy, optimum relationships, because fundamentally they serve our own well-being to optimize our well-being. So for anybody that's thinking about, well, how do I learn about having secure attachments? That's a whole chapter on attachment patterns. What are the key things to look for in a spouse? What are the key things to think about in having and offering healthy relationships with friends, family, and a partner? That's in the book. Because again, I think our communities are underserved in relational literacy, if I can put it like that.
Definitely. I think we have know a little over time, but maybe room for one or two questions if that's okay. Um, so there's a question here. There's two questions. So the first one is, what is the best way to love the worst version of ourselves?
What I'm reminded of is the phrase that we cannot hate ourselves into loving us. So if we continue to hate ourselves, that hate is not, again, miraculously overnight going to turn into love. Instead, it's about how can I start to have a more caring, supportive, loving relationship with that part of me. Now, that part of us, that worst version of us, in and of itself might not be something that you go, well, that's the part of me that I want to embrace. It's not the part of me that I want to have. It's not the part that I want to nurture. This is not about nurturing it. This is about how can I have a relationship with it so that I am then not doing the self-oppressing, so that I am not kicking myself, that I am not hating that part of me. So the best way to love the worst version of ourselves or the worst parts of us is to move away from negative. Before we get into loving, caring, compassionate, can we move into neutrality? Can we just move the needle one step into, I'm going to first of all stop berating that part of me. I'm going to stop allowing my inner critic to call it names. I'm going to stop attacking that part of me. So we might not be able to move straight into loving that part of us, but can that worst version of ourselves, or can that worst part of ourselves at least stop being vilified? Can it stop being strung up? Can it stop being attacked? And that's where these positive affirmations come in. Can it be a positive affirmation to be a neutral affirmation around it? Could be, I'm acknowledging that part of me. I acknowledge and accept that that is a part of me. So it's not about moving straight into, I'm going to love and embrace and nurture that part of me, but can at least that part of me not continue to be kicked while it's already down? You've kicked it enough. It's already on the floor with enough stab wounds in it. It's already battered and bruised. Can we at least stop ourselves from continuing to attack it? And so for me, that is anti-oppressive practice includes the stopping of negativity, the stopping of continuing to criticize and oppress those parts of us. So for me, it would be to that worst version of you. So Adnan, in asking that question, can you, rather than thinking miraculously you can move into loving that worst part of you, can you start to stop attacking it? Can you start to move into, I acknowledge that part of me. I recognize that there is that part of me. That is a part of me. So moving into neutrality first, then we can move into more positive. Whether you want to accept that part of you or not is entirely subjective and up to you as an individual. But can you then move into a place that then starts to be compassionate towards it? But we can't be compassionate. We cannot be compassionate to the very thing that we're kicking at the same time.
Absolutely. Very well said. There's another question, I think last question, and I'll answer the other question because the book and the code I will put that in the chat. I think this is from a parent who's asking, should an LGBT identifying person be reminded about the importance of living a life true to Allah, and the test is to control the nafs and the desire. So I think this is coming from if I'm a parent and I'm trying to guide my child to a God-centric life, should I not remind them of what a God-centric life looks like?
I'm hesitating because it's not straight into an answer of saying yes, because I think the question itself identifies potentially what the parent is wanting the child to know.
Mhm.
And I think it's really important that as parent, we have to hold on to, this is what I want to remind that child of. And that is absolutely right and true for the parent. And also, as the parent, we have to hold on to, where is the child at? How is the child feeling and experiencing this? Where are they at emotionally in this? Because a child being reminded of that, I can imagine that can be experienced as being told off or being criticized or thinking that they don't already know it. I can recognize that a child hearing that might see it as they're being patronized potentially. And so I really want us to kind of again move into, how do we hold space for their lived experience? How do we, in knowing that we want to absolutely remind them of the importance of that, and that the test is to control the nafs and desires, absolutely. But that for me is secondary to, are you holding space to be in conversation with your child where they feel safe enough to even have a conversation with you? There is no point going in with these kind of rules and inverted commas or these reminders if you haven't yet built a healthy, nurturing relationship with that child to even have the conversation. Otherwise, you're coming in with a message that lacks any emotional support behind it. You're coming in as a headliner. You're coming in as the messenger. You're coming in as, oh, I'm just letting you know this. And a child can then go, well, don't you think I know that? Or they'll reject it. So for me, it's about stepping into as a parent, and I appreciate this can be really challenging as the parent, because you have your agenda, you have what you want, you have your own wishes and desires for your child to be following a certain path and to be fulfilling their obligations and following that straight path. And I appreciate that there is that absolute desperation in a parent to want to metaphorically pull their child towards them, or to pull them into, this is how I want you to see it. But before a child can be, rather than trying to pull a child onto that path and to accept these messages, it's about, how do we have a conversation with the child first so that they then can be guided, and that can be nurtured organically within them. Because the moment we tell them, it becomes a almost like an avoidance demand. It can be that they kick their heels in, kick their heels into the ground, that they can become even more resistant to what you want to say. They're going to slam the door, potentially really actually slam the door, or they might slam the door metaphorically into actually not listening to you. So there is something here about, if there are things that you wish to say to your child, have you actually set up the right conditions for that client, for that child to be open to be listening to you? Because I think so often when it comes to parenting, parents can be so quick to go in and want to give the message that they haven't yet actually nurtured and curated the relationship and the environment for the message to be heard. And so that for me would be the primary thing to focus on. Are you building a relationship in which that child is open to hearing what you have to say?
Absolutely. We have a parent support circle, and we have this term where we say whoever loves the longest wins,
Mm,
So if if your child has gone into the LGBTQ community, well, there's a reason that that child felt loved and appreciated, and
mm,
they felt that that was their home. Whereas they might feel that, oh, I might be rejected in the Muslim
mm,
community because of the shame and
mm,
what we discussed earlier about the difficulty of finding those safe spaces to have that. And that, of course, once you've built that relationship with them, and then you can have very open conversations, but not at the first go. At the first go, it's building that trust and building that relationship, and really saying, okay, this is a part of you. This is not the whole of you, and I'm not gonna see you in a binary way, the way that you're thinking I'm going to see you in a binary way, but I'm um, still having, there's nothing that takes the mother son or the child, the parent relationship away. That relationship is always there. And I think that is sometimes what we kind of forget, the humanness of it, that there's still a link there, there's still a relationship there. And um, yeah, rather than seeing them as very distinct realities, saying no. I think a lot of people struggle with the difference between accepting something, being accepting and allowing something, rather than just um, uh, that love doesn't mean acceptance. Do you know what I mean? Like it means that I still love you. I may not accept the things that I'm doing to you, but as a parent, I choose to love you regardless of and there's so many situations where parents have to do that.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a key point, and it kind of links into the question that I just spotted in the Q&A list, in which holding space for somebody, holding space for another person's beliefs, lived experiences, identity, does not equal acceptance of it. If
Mhm.
that was the case, I wouldn't have a job as a therapist, because I would not be able to hold a space for anybody unless they completely agreed with me. We
Mhm.
start to see how ludicrous that is. So I think the first thing we've got to realize is that holding space does not automatically mean that I, in my personal beliefs, accept it. So I'm thinking absolutely here
Mhm.
from a parental point of view, because that's kind of the lens that we're looking at this through. So as a parent, you holding space for your child is not an automatic assumption that you now are all embracing and accepting of any or every sexuality. It is about how you hold, it's about holding space for your child. It's holding space for your child to speak to you about the struggles, challenges, difficulties that they are experiencing, the confusion that they are feeling and thinking. And this links into then in answering the question that I can see in the chat, which is, what openers would you suggest to a child who is resistant to listening? I'm going to do a classic therapist thing and flip it on its head. Are you, as the parent, listening? Are you, as the parent, showing up and role modeling somebody who is there to listen to the child? Because again, as a parent, we're quick to want to meet our needs in that relationship. Parents are quick to want to go, well, this is what I'm needing from having a conversation with you, child. That it's against the faith and follow the straight path, and you have to manage your nafs and desires. Now, that is the parent's need. But I keep saying I want to say client, but a child is going to be resistant to listening to that, because they can feel it emotionally, physiologically, mentally, emotionally. They can feel that that is about you, parent, putting your need and your message primary and centered. Instead, as a parent, it's about leaning back and going, actually, I need to model listening. I need to model holding a space. A child is not going to listen to you if they think that you're not going to listen to them in return. So there is something about, we have to show up and be the person that we want them to be in response. We have to represent that and role model that first. So show up and hold space for your child. Have a conversation about, and this is where empathy comes in and humility comes in. This is an invitation for any parent that has a child that is exploring, thinking about, confused about, conflicted about their sexuality or gender, is, can you open up a space with your child to say, I understand that this is difficult. I understand that this feels challenging for you, or insert feeling here of what they are feeling. And I want to be a person that you feel able to speak to this about. And I am here to hold space. I am here to create space for us to be in conversation about this. Because guaranteed, if you are not seen as a safe person by your child to have that conversation with, they will go elsewhere, and they will then be having conversations with people that will give them alternative messaging, that may well lead them down the wrong path, that will give them advice that goes directly against the advice you want to give them. So we cannot make our messages be heard by children, but if we model that we can offer them being a person that they can feel safe enough with, that we can have those conversations with, that I am there to be able to empathize with their experience. If we do all of that first, we are then modeling ourselves as a person they may then feel safe enough to then tell you what they're going through, and then be open to what you then say in return. So the parent's message comes after all of that.
100%. Yeah, because the child is, as humans, uh, when we're talking about such sensitive parts of ourselves, we're looking at emotional validation before logical validation, right? So if I feel I'm safe with my parent, then at some point I'll be able to discuss why I think things in a
Yeah.
certain way. But if my guard is up, then I'm never going to tell you what I really think, because I don't have the emotional safety in that relationship.
Absolutely. And if you are a parent watching this, listening to this and going, well, my child is resistant, again, my invitation to the parent is, they are not resistant because of a problem with them. They are resistant because of how they feel in relationship with you. So as a parent, there's an invitation here to practice some self-reflection. Am I showing up angry? Am I showing up judgmental? Am I showing up frustrated, impatient? Am I showing up not being able to really listen to them? Am I showing up only wanting my message, my needs to be met, and my message to be heard? If
And
we
I
cannot offer the space to them, they're not going to offer the space to us to hear our message.
And I think both for therapists and parents, it's very difficult of a role. It's like, if they don't experience the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's the role of a parent and a therapist, to say, I'm holding space for you, then they think our faith is a very judgmental faith, and it doesn't have a capacity to hold space to just listen and yeah.
Yeah, and also to going back kind of to bring this kind of full loop really, is also to recognize that again, as human beings, we live as relational beings. And if you are a parent that is blessed with a child, that is what is written for you. If then what is written for that child is then a challenge or a difficulty for them, and that is their test, what has been written for you as the parent is that what's been written for you as the parent is that you have been written as a parent with a child who has these difficulties and challenges. So again, in admonishing or criticizing or judging the child, we are also then dismissing and ridiculing and judging then what's been written for us as the parent. So for me, it's about what is written for our children is written for the parent being the parent of that child and what's been written for them. So if you are a parent that has a child who is LGBTQ plus, is sitting with questions around gender and or sexuality, that's been written for you as the parent of that child. So in as much as we want to then offer that compassion to the child, can we also offer that compassion to ourselves, that we can then sit there and recognize, gosh, this is how I'm being tested. And Allah tests those whom he loves the most. So how can we share that between us relationally, between the parent and the child? And to go, do you know what, child? Obviously, I'm not going to use this language with the child, but in my head, it's like, do you know what, child? Gosh, that's been written for you, and then it's been written for me, that I have the test, the challenge, but also the blessing to be the parent of a child that is being tested. How can we offer ourselves that humanity, that humility for us? If as a parent, how can we offer that humility and that empathy and compassion for the child, any child, and that child of any age as well? Because of course it could be a grown-up child, a grown-up child with a parent. Yeah, anyone of any age, you're still in relationship with a parent or parents or with children yourselves. And so the challenge and test is not isn't is it's a test or a challenge for the individual that's carrying that burden. It is it is a relational test or challenge then for the person that is their parent or their child or their son or daughter as well.
It's like what we talk about in faith when we say um, uh, we all go in our graves and God's going to ask us as a parent, okay, that was their test,
Mhm.
but how did you show up for them, right? What did you do to support them when they were
Yeah.
in that test, rather than saying, oh, you led them astray. I think that's what parents first think
Mm.
parents is, oh no, they're led astray. But actually, wait, what is
Mm.
my role? Maybe my
Yeah.
role here is how do I how do I react with them? What is the emotional support that I
Yeah.
can give them? Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? I think that's a beautiful message to really end on, which is actually for all of us, being a parent or not a parent, something about how am I showing up? What is my role in my relationships with the people that have been put on my path in front of me? For every single person that crosses our path in this world, each of us are going to be judged and questioned on how did I show up in response or in relationship to that person. So rather than going around and judging other people, I think we have to really learn to have some humility around the fact that we're going to be questioned on that, on how we've shown up. And that for me actually really kind of then brings us back into, oh gosh, I can have no judgment of other people because I'm going to be judged. I've got to be accountable for how I am showing up. And that's kind of enough on my plate in a way, let alone moving into a position of judging other people and admonishing and criticizing what other people are or what they do. Instead, it's about I am accountable for how I have shown up in my relationship with this person or with these people. And that can be anybody, child, with our own parents, with our own children, with our own friends and family, and whoever else that is meant to cross our path. We are accountable and responsible for how we show up in those relationships.
Fantastic. And thank you so much. And we have um, comments here, informative and important session, and people agreeing. And it's a great book. You can get it, The Muslim Guide to Wellbeing. And what I love about it is it's got what Sister Myra said, questions at the end on how does this relate to God? How does this relate to you? How does it, and those three relationships. So it's a workbook. It's not just something which you read. And I really like that about books which are workbooks. So it's very practical, goes
Yes.
about the affirmations. Um, I love attachment theory. That's there and there as well. So really, really good stuff. And and I know it's I want to thank Sister Myra again. I know it's late there. She's probably been working in the day and in the evening. She's offered this time for us. I want to make a dua that Allah continues to bless you, bless the work that you're doing. And I think um, how you mentioned neurodiversity, you mentioned ADHD, you mentioned autism, and I think when people like yourself are vulnerable and they show up with what Allah has given them, what Allah tests us with, and I think that that really shines to the work, and kind of saying, I'm Muslim, I'm proud of being Muslim, I'm proud of my heritage, and I'm proud of where my belief, and it's okay for us to have a different point of view and still have humility and still have respect, because that's what our Deen teaches us. It does not teach us judgment. It teaches us humility, and as we started with the verse which says, Amir bil Maruf, have the humility, and Nahi anil Munkar. And at some point, yes, some point I will say, well, when I've established a relationship and I say, like you said, to the parent, you said, it's both a blessing and a challenge. So I'm being completely honest, and I'm having the balance between amr bil maruf, enjoining the good, and forbidding the evil. I'm not just forbidding the evil and not enjoining the good. I'm having a balance of the two. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time and the work that you continue to do. And may Allah bless you.
Thank you all so much, and I appreciate people asking questions and commenting, and yeah, to discover more. As you said, the book is filled with it is a workbook. It's a very reflective practice, lots of space in there to scribble in it, write in it, lots of worksheets, lots of tools, lots of resources. Both of my books, and this is how I write, this is how I teach, it's a very proactive, intentional approach to our well-being and our self-care, and offering anti-oppressive services and approaches to ourselves and to one another. And so, yeah, the book is filled with direct ways of helping you to develop those optimum relationships. So yeah, this book isn't just theory about relationships. This very much is right now, go and do it. And this is how you can now go and nurture your relationships. So for anybody that buys a copy, thank you so much. And inshallah, it offers you the support that I had the intention in writing the book. And for me, it's always about remembering that if this book crosses your path, it was meant to be. And whatever good you get from it, that comes from Allah, not from me.
So beautiful, and may Allah continue to bless your work. And thank you for your work, fantastic work in the mental health sector, raising the Muslim voice, raising and putting this out, and it certainly spoke to me. So we did this webinar. So thank you so much, and may Allah continue to bless you.